Hi everyone, thanks for coming back again. Today we're going to do 10 Shoulders number 26, and we're going to read out of a book written by Moray King, and it's called Quest for Zero Point Energy, Engineering Principles for Free Energy. Now, what we're doing is we're always doing Ken Shoulders work, and of course, Ken Shoulders work shows up in here continuously. So on charge clusters. So this, what we're going to actually read is a whole chapter on charge clusters, and we're going to have Brendan start reading, and then I'll take over a little bit later on. So I'll let you
Okay,
go at her.
thank you, Eddie. Okay, so this document has been put together by Eddie, with bits and pieces of text, is from the book Quest for Zero Point Energy: Engineering Principles for Free Energy by Moray B. King. And I leave this one out, Eddie.
Yeah, you can just read the highlighted section there.
Okay, from reference 26, a mathematical model of charged clusters, shoulders EVs. Charge clusters is another word for EVs or EV EV
Electrovalidium, and then
and
EVO is an exotic vacuum object. They're
exotic
all the
vacuum
same thing.
exotic vacuum objects is presented that shows the stability is due to a helical vortex ring possessing an extraordinary um, poloidal circulation. This
Yeah.
in this non-relativistic calculation, the poloidal filament would have to be thin. A spherical electron cluster is unstable and would tend to form into a toroid by a force balance relationship. The calculation shows that the energy density of the poloidal filament in a charged cluster is 100 times higher than in a supernova explosion.
Wow.
And also from Ken Shoulders reference number 27, Energy 1991, energy conversion using high charge density, US patent number 5018180. Fundamental discovery on how to launch a micron size negatively charged plasmoid called electrum validium, or exotic vacuum objects or charged clusters, EV.
Mhm.
An EV yields excess energy over unity whenever it hits the anode or travels down the axis of a hollow coil. The excess energy comes from the 0 point energy, ZPE.
CPE, and of course, Ken Shoulders coined zero point energy.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I just thought I'd include that because that first section there, the stability is due to a helical vortex ring. That's basically what we've shown over and over again in some of the other shows and whatnot that we've done. And it's really important to Ken Shoulders' work. So I think Brendan's going to start reading the chapter, the beginning of the chapter now.
Okay, charge clusters. The basis of 0 point energy inventions. June 1997, abstract. Many free energy inventions utilize, sometimes unwittingly, the phenomena of charge clusters, which may provide the coupling to the 0 point energy for their source of power. Shoulders demonstrates how to produce these micron-sized plasmoids called EVs, electrovalidium, or EVO, exotic vacuum objects or charged clusters. And his measurements show they contain a net charge on the order of 100 billion electrons. Recent investigations of the EV suggest its anomalous stability is due to a thin helical vortex ring filament possessing an extraordinary poloidal rotational velocity. Such a vortex ring has characteristics similar to the well-studied filamentation instability, an intensely tightening force-free vortex that occurs in non-neutral plasmas. For an EVE, the filament closes upon itself. The vortex ring can be launched when ions in a highly polarized plasma or dielectric during breakdown rush towards a point cathode or dendrite in a fracturing crystal, whose tip explodes in response to a sharp electrostatic pulse. EV production is likely occurring in fractoemission, sonoluminescence, and in most electrical discharges. If so, it can be. Do you want to read just the highlighted
Yeah.
bits,
No. Yeah, you can read the
everything?
whole thing. Yeah.
If so, it can be the foundation for the unifying hypothesis to explain the energy source behind a wide variety of seemingly diverse inventions, including More's and Correa's plasma tubes, Griggs' hydrosonic pump, Sweet's conditioned barium ferrite, Brown's electrogravitic capacitors, Gray's motor, Hyde's generator, and even cold fusion. The inventions which utilize fractoemission at their basis tend to retain the EV plasmoids, and their simple construction offers opportunity for widespread replication. Introduction. Could there be inventions that tap energy directly from empty space? That depends on the nature of the fabric of space. Today, most scientists believe that empty space is simply a void. Across history, mankind believed just the opposite. For example, ancient Eastern philosophies viewed space as filled with an all-pervading energy called prana. Since the inception of Western science in the turn of the 20th century, space was thought to be filled with a hypothetical substance called the ether, which would be the medium to support the propagation of light waves. When modeled as a material substance, the ether seemed contradictory. It had to be tenuous and allow matter to pass through it without notice, yet extremely rigid to manifest the high velocity of light. The null result of the Michelson-Morley experiment to detect the ether wind perhaps came as a relief to the scientific community, because they could simply accept the postulates of relativity, which yield the principle of Lorentz invariance, without dealing with the cumbersome theoretical artifact that would tend to deny it.
Mm-hmm.
Principle of Lorentz invariance means the state of a physical system, i.e., laws of physics, are the same for all bodies or observer frames of reference when they are moving at a constant velocity in free space, an inertial frame. A simplistic material model of the ether would immediately violate the principle, since different observers would experience an ether wind as they move relative to it. Attempts to contrive hydrodynamic models where a materialistic ether is dragged or flows beget complexity as the models are adjusted to recover Lorentz invariance. And in addition, the etheric substance must be both tenuous to matter yet rigid for light. The principle of relativity with Lorentz invariance is so fundamental to physics that the scientific community really can't be blamed for using Occam's razor to excise the belief in a material ether. For a simple void model yields a principle that yields for a simple, sorry, that's Occam's razor, to excise the belief in a material ether. For a simple void model yields the principle immediately.
Mm-hmm.
0-point energy. However, the void model cannot explain the nature of light, which was why the ether was invented in the first place. Nor can classical physics explain the spectrum of black body radiation, or even why electron atomic orbits don't collapse. The resolution occurred in the 1930s with the theory of quantum mechanics, a mathematical formalism that modeled atomic processes remarkably well. The equations contained a term that represented the underlying energetic jitter inherent in all processes in nature. The jitter was called the zero-point fluctuations, ZPF, or zero-point energy, ZPE, since the energy is not thermal and is present. Whoopsie, is that 90? Is that 90? It's 96 again. So that's
Yeah.
must have done that twice. Okay, so since the energy is not thermal and is present at absolute 0 degrees Kelvin, Dirac proposed that the source of the jitter was from the fabric of space itself, and it could manifest short-lived pairs of elementary particles, each with their corresponding antiparticle. These are called virtual due to their short lifetimes. The discovery of antimatter and particle pair production in accelerator experiments popularized Dirac's view of space. In the 1940s, the theory of quantum electrodynamics was established that heavily relied on the action of the virtual particles to explain atomic interactions with electromagnetic fields. The theory was so successful and accurate, it became the Anstas or pattern for later theories to model the weak and strong nuclear interactions. In face of such success, do virtual particles really come into physical existence, or are they just an imaginary theoretical construct? Rather than have the virtual activity as a theoretical artifact, the theory of rather than have the virtual activity as a theoretical artifact, the theory of stochastic electrodynamics has a zero-point energy at the foundation of all processes in physics. And it shows how quantum behavior arises from it, such as black body radiation and atomic stability. Recent work has shown how the zero-point energy may also be at the foundation of macroscopic phenomena such as gravity and inertia. From this perspective, the ether has effectively re-entered physics, not as a material substance, but rather as comprised of highly concentrated fluctuations of electromagnetic field energy. I think stochastic comes from the word random. I think I won't look it up, but I think it relates to uncertainty and randomness. Stochastic electrodynamics postulates that the zero-point energy spectral energy density, the function that describes how much energy is stored in space at each frequency, must be Lorentz invariant. There is only one functional form that fulfills this postulate, and that is the energy density must be proportional to the frequency cubed.
Mm.
The function scaling constant is related to Planck's constant, which completely specifies the description of the zero-point energy spectrum. The spectrum yields accurate results when used in calculations, but there is one philosophical problem. The energy density at every point in space appears to be infinite, since the spectral energy density keeps rising with frequency. Quantum electrodynamics suffers the same problem with its virtual particles and uses the scheme of renormalization to subtract off infinities to leave a finite residue when making calculations. In a practical interaction with matter, the very high zero-point energy frequencies would have to be fast to be absorbed. Nonetheless, the question remains, from where does the zero-point energy come, and how can it appear infinite at every point in space? Likewise, where do these virtual particles come from that pop in and out of space? Wheeler answers this question in his already unified theory that combines stochastic electrodynamics with general relativity, called geometrodynamics. General relativity shows that when mass or energy density become large, the fabric of space bends into a fourth dimension with sufficient density pinches into a hyperspatial form called a wormhole. The wormhole channels the zero-point energy in the form of electric flux, high-density field lines, in a direction orthogonal to our three dimensions of space. Flux appears to enter our space through many white holes and leave through many black holes.
Interesting.
The size of these holes are on the order of the Planck length, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. The energy density is enormous, 10 to the 93 grams per cubic centimeter. As the orthogonal flux passes through our space, the many holes are constantly being created and destroyed in a chaotic maelstrom called the quantum foam. Vorticity in the flow would manifest as elementary particles. A directional bias in the flow would manifest as vacuum polarization. In this model, the elementary particles are like whirlpools sustained by the fourth dimensional flux. Wheeler's geometrodynamics is perhaps the most powerful of the zero-point energy theories, and if we could find a means to control and coherently channel some of that orthogonal flux into our three-space novel technologies to tap appreciable energy, as well as control inertia or gravity, might be possible. Vacuum polarization. The technical question becomes how can we most influence the zero-point energy flux? Quantum electrodynamics shows that the different elementary particles have different vacuum polarization interactions with the zero-point energy. In particular, electrons, especially in standard conductors, are effectively in equilibrium with the zero-point fluctuations and manifest the entire interaction as a distributed electron cloud. No net vacuum energy absorption could be expected from the standard conductors and antennas. Nuclei, on the other hand, exhibit steep lines of vacuum polarization converging onto the particle. Whenever nuclei undergo abrupt motion or collisions, appreciable vacuum polarization effects occur, yielding precipitation of new particles as well as exotic coherent vacuum states. Plasmas during ion acoustic resonance have exhibited energy anomalies whose source could be a coherent macroscopic vacuum polarization across the plasma. Recent analysis has shown that the abrupt motion of a dielectric boundary triggers real photons from the 0-point energy into existence. The energy production is proportional to the fourth derivative of the dielectric's velocity, which is an indication that the motion must be sharply abrupt. Sharp, abrupt motion of matter is a technical key to tapping the 0-point energy. Sonoluminescence. Eberlein extended her analysis of the dielectric's boundary interaction with the 0-point energy to explain sonoluminescence, a phenomenon where a 50 picosecond light pulse is triggered by a collapsing air bubble in water excited by ultrasonics. An abrupt squeeze and release is provided by the bubble's dielectric boundary, which exhibits an appreciable fourth derivative of velocity at the turnaround point, minimum radius, where the surface changes direction. The sharp squeeze and release is similar to the proposal of using sharply pulsed bucking electromagnetic field to create a pulsed scalar excitation, which induces a slight orthorotation twisting of the fourth dimensional 0-point energy flux into our three-dimensional space. Sonoluminescence uses the nuclei in the polarized dielectric bubble boundary to provide the bucking scalar squeeze field. The abrupt non-inertial movement of matter, especially plasma nuclei, appears to be an excellent activator of the vacuum energy. The trick now is to absorb that energy. Eberlein's study of single bubble sonoluminescence shows that even though the emitted spectrum appears similar to a black body radiator at 40,000 degrees Kelvin, it is not a high temperature phenomenon, but rather is an artifact of the 0-point energy spectrum in its interaction with the bubble boundary. The artifact might be expected in view of Boyer's calculation, showing how the black body spectrum can be derived from the 0-point energy spectrum. In particular, the lower frequency components of the black body spectrum are absent, which result in little interaction with the water to form heat or produce molecular dissociation. The absence of plasma recombination emissions or ion radicals in the single bubble experiments support the thesis that heat is not being produced. Thus, I think that means though, there's a typographical error. Thus, even though we are activating, even though we are activating the vacuum energy into light pulses. The light propagates away unless we arrange for a means to absorb it. Resonant absorption. Eberlein's analysis shows that the bubble at its minimum radius, about 1 micron, does exhibit a resonant interaction with the emissions, causing an enhancement by a factor of 1,000, creating a resonant absorber is another key, especially if the high frequency energy can be converted to a more useful form. Perhaps Bede's non-linear microscopic resonators designed to absorb very high frequency 0-point energy fluctuations and emit low beat frequencies would respond well if it were in contact with the bubbles. Inducing a plasma in the water might likewise provide the opportunity for resonant absorption. Meyer used multiple excitation methods, electromagnetic light and ultrasonics, simultaneously to dissociate water and how do you pronounce that?
Puharich.
Sorry?
I think it's Puharich.
Pure-rich electrically stimulated water at the resonant frequency of its hydrogen oxygen bond to dissociate it. Both inventors induced a plasma in water electrically excited at frequencies in the ultrasonic band and claimed a net energy gain in their systems. Inducing turbulence and cavitation in water might also produce plasma yielding a resonant interaction and absorption of 0-point energy. Griggs' claim to produce heat in excess of its input energy via cavitation in his hydrosonic pump, and Keeley claimed excess energy in his water motor based on a turbulent operation similar to water hammer vibrations. Schulberger likewise claimed anomalous energy of causing water to flow in a processional, turbulent manner through carefully crafted pipes, where the flow manifested a characteristic bluish glow akin to sonoluminescence. Also, there are cold fusion projects using ultrasonic stimulation, producing excess heat. Direct evidence for plasma phenomena in water was recorded by Matsumoto, where tracks of small plasmoid, like ball lightning, were photographed. If boundary conditions or turbulence can deform a spherical sonoluminescent bubble toward a pancake shape, center could pinch and transform it into a plasmoid vortex ring. Plasmoids just might be an ideal resonant absorber of the 0-point energy. Plasmoids. Plasmoid was the name given to Bostick for a stable plasma vortex ring he created with abrupt electric discharges. His studies indicated that the plasmoid particles would flow in a helical fashion, with the helix closing onto itself, producing a toroid. The plasmoid particles undergo a precessional motion, a spin of a spin, with a poloidal spin closing into a toroidal spin. Could such a flow be a natural orthorotator of the fourth dimensional zero-point energy flux? De Palma's study of forced precession in a mechanical system exhibited gravitational and inertial anomalies. If the zero-point energy is the basis of inertia, then it would likewise be the basis of angular momentum. Since systems normally resist precessional motion, a force-free system exhibiting precession would be surprising. If such a system alters the zero-point energy flux, then it might seem to inertially disconnect from the three-space universe, a sort of Machian disconnection. Mach originally proposed the principle that the basis of inertia was the gravitational influence of the fixed stars. Moreover, such a system would contain excess energy provided from the zero-point energy flux. Could the zero-point energy plasma system have a natural stability in the vortex ring form? Reid has suggested that the mathematical modeling of Beltrami of the force-free vortex might provide the engineering foundation for manipulating the zero-point energy. The force-free vortex can taper like a tornado and concentrate an extreme energy density toward a point, making it potentially good activator for zero-point energy coupling. Such vortex filaments have been observed in plasmas, known as filamentation instability, and they tend to occur in counter-rotating pairs. Figure 1. Bostick also observed plasmoids. Eddie, what page are you taking over on?
Just read to the end of this paragraph, and then I'll start reading where it says charge clusters.
Oh, okay.
So just you've only
The
got it.
zero-point energy plasma system have a natural stability in the vortex ring form. Reid has suggested that the mathematical modeling of Beltrami of the force-free vortex might provide the engineering foundation for manipulating the zero-point energy. The force-free vortex can taper like a tornado and concentrate an extreme energy density toward a point, making it a potentially good activator for the zero-point energy coupling. Such vortex filaments have been observed in plasmas, known as the filamentation instability, and they tend to occur in counter-rotating pairs. Figure 1. Bostick also observed plasmoids to be formed in pairs with opposite helicity arising from plasma turbulence. Could such a model be archetypal and likewise present vacuum polarization pair production from the turbulent virtual plasma of the quantum foam? The vortex filament from a violent electrical discharge has been observed to sometimes form rings, figure 2, which has been suggested to be the basis of ball lightning formation. Ball lightning has also been modeled as a vortex ring, and its anomalous energy content suggests that it might be cohering the zero-point energy. A careful investigation could occur if we could reliably reproduce ball lightning in the laboratory.
Great. Thank you, Brendan, for reading through that. And I'll carry on here. Charge clusters. It appears that a phenomenon like a miniature form of ball lightning has been discovered and is reproducible in the laboratory. Shoulders has shown that impressing a sharp negative pulse through a pointed cathode in contact with a dielectric positioned on top of a plate anode launches a micron-sized negatively charged cluster, which is important, that he named electroviridium. Messiates claimed the same discovery and named it an ecton.
Yeah.
Historically, Leduc documented this phenomenon in his research predating 1900. Shoulders has measured that the 1 micron diameter EV contains approximately 10 to the 11 electrons and 10 to the 6th ions. When launched, it typically travels at a velocity about 1/10 the speed of light. Shoulders has shown that that e-
Just put that
Shoulders has shown that when an EV strikes an anode, it produces an electrical impulse which contains more energy than it took to create it. Moreover, when the EV passes through a coil or in parallel to a serpentine shaped conductor, a pulse is induced on the coil, which also exhibits a greater energy output than the original input. Shoulders and Puthoff suggest that the excess energy is from the ZPE, zero point energy. Messiates shows that the ecton is launched as a result of an explosive emission from the cathode tip. Just prior to the emission, the cathode melts and an extremely sharp liquid jet extends from it. The explosion destroys the sharp tip of the electrode, and it is difficult to reuse it to launch another ecton. Shoulders uses liquid metal, example mercury, to maintain the tip, and thus keeps it a source for repeatable launching. Shoulders also covers the cathode by a hollow dielectric shroud designed to separate the EV from all of the residual ions in the explosion emission. In addition, the shroud might offer other possibilities to enhance the effect. Messiates has shown that a surface plasma on the dielectric amplifies the explosion emission. A shoulder's shroud could be used like a hollow cathode electrode that accumulates a glow plasma just before firing. The explosive emission through the glow plasma might launch a larger and even more powerful EV. Experimental support for empowering the EV from a glow plasma may arise from the research of Curie,
Correct. Yeah.
whose Curie, whose tubes are designed to build up a cathode glow, which then pulses, a phenomenon known as the abnormal glow discharge. Curie provides a circuit to restrict the current such that the lossy vacuum arc discharge that follows is immediately quenched and causes the tube to pulse at a chosen repetition rate. Correa has measured a significant over unity energy gain from these tubes and has likely rediscovered the operating principles of the plasma tubes of Murray. The discovery of Messiates supports the conjecture that the abnormal glow discharge can launch EVs, and these are likely the source of the energy anomalies in inventions that include electric discharges. The
That's
theoretical,
involved electric discharges. Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, the theoretical stability of EVs presents difficulties. A simple spherical model of 10 to the 11th electrons um, could fail due to Coulomb repulsion. Zylokowski and
Xy, xylon, like Xy. Zio
Zylokowski,
Zylokowski. Yeah, it's quite a different one.
yeah, and uh, Tippett
Tippett.
Tippett proposed a collective plasma system interacting with the localized electromagnetic waves. The analysis uses a vacuum polarization displacement current term that manifests a sort of quantum potential that compensates for the expansion force. Such a term is significant only if the formation time of the EV is in the order of a femtosecond,
Femtosecond.
10, yeah,
10 to the
10 to
minus.
the minus 15th second, so very, very small. Um, the analysis involves plasma flow vorticity, but is not clear what geometry the flow takes. Jin and Fox have proposed a toroidal vortex ring using a classical non-relativistic analysis of non-neutral plasmas. They showed that a launched spherical charge distribution would not be stable, but rather would naturally pinch into a vortex ring. The analysis attempts to show that the poloidal rotation of the vortex ring could produce a large enough magnetic field to extract the out, outer circulating electrons in a di,
Di, di, Dicotron.
di, dichotron slipping stream flow. The poloidal rotational velocity would have to be extraordinary, and the stability ring would have to be an extremely thin filament to keep the poloidal electron velocities well below the speed of light. The calculated energy densities within the filament could be greater than a neutron star. Wow. At such energy densities, vacuum polarization effects could come into play and should really be included in the model. Also, the EV's polarization interaction with the dielectric guide is a stabilizing factor and should likewise be included. A classical non-relativistic analysis is probably not sufficient to accurately model the EV. Nonetheless, the suggestion that a thin filament vortex ring is the underlying geometry of the EV can be supported from studying the filamentation instability, whose imploding, tightening tendency is recognized to produce extremely high energy densities. Since quantum electrodynamic effects are sufficient at high
So
energy,
significant.
significant, yet at high energy densities, a complete model of the EV should be also included in a spectral interaction with the zero point energy, since the thin plasma filaments would would exhibit a resonant coupling with the short wavelength, higher frequency, and thus more energetic portion of the zero point spectrum. It appears that the ions in the polarized glow plasma and the exploding liquid metal cathode tip combine to create an abrupt compression that forms and energizes the charge cluster's vortex ring. So that compression is really important. Um, just prior to the explosive emission, the polarized glow plasma and the polarized liquid metal protuberance
Oh,
form two symmetrical boundary layer surfaces, the
surrounding.
bound
Sorry.
yeah surrounding the surface electrons. The explosive emission launches the surface electrons as well as the metal tip ion boundary layer. The emitted electron cloud then experiences a tremendous explosive compression between the two symmetrical ion layers. The metal tip ion layer punches through the glow plasma layer, creating turbulence, which initiates the poloidal rotation of the vortex ring. The perfect boundary symmetry from the liquid perturbance and glow plasma not only causes an abrupt scalar compression, which polarizes the vacuum, and ortho rotates the 0 point flux, but it also provides the needed boundary conditions to create a tight vortex filament that is closed up upon itself, trapping the excess energy. Shoulders observed observations of the EVs support the conjecture that they are like vacuum energy pumps. As the EV propagates down a dielectric guide, it is constantly ionizing the dielectric surface, emitting electrons and emitting light. Yet the EV does not decay. It travels the same, it yields the same, yeah, the same pulse when it hits the anode, regardless of the distance it travels in the guide. Also, when the high velocity EV triggers a pulse on a surrounding coil, it likewise does not decay. Moreover, the output pulse from the coil exceeds the input pulse that originally launched the EV. The EV must keep moving to remain stable and seems to feed from its environment, absorbing electrons preceding it and shredding electrons in its wake.
Shedding electrons.
Shedding electrons in its wake. Nuclear transmutation. When the EV strikes the anode, it damages the plate, leaving small craters. Such craters exhibit a wider explosive characteristic, and these contain a further surprise. X-ray microanalysis of the crater shows a wide range of elements that were not present before the strike, implying that the EV induced nuclear transmutations. Shoulders has proposed that since the EV can carry about 10 to the 6 ions or protons in a hydrogen gas experiment, it could accelerate the protons with sufficient kinetic energy to overcome the Coulomb barrier and penetrate the lattice nuclei, triggering transmutation effects. A classic calculation shows uh, classic calculation supports Shoulders' hypothesis. The microanalysis of palladium target showed magnesium, calcium, silicon, gallium, and
Gallium.
gold, gallium, and gold, all from a single EV strike. Shoulders has named the EV carrying nuclei nuclear electrovillidium (NEV). The NEV created when the deuterium loaded palladium or
Palladium.
palladium or oxygen loaded nickel cracks internally, producing the NEV by fractal emission. Fractal emission has been observed to produce light emissions in experiments where a crystal is cracked. The emissions exhibit an anomalous persistence, sometimes for hours. The fractal emission is akin to earthquake lights, where a phenomenon like ball lightning arises from an earthquake fissure. The hypothesis that fractal emissions of NEVs is the energy source behind cold fusion gains further support from the fact that the anomalous heat in the bulk palladium experience does not arise immediately after loading the palladium to saturation. It only takes 3 hours, but rather occurs after hundreds of hours and then in bursts. Like sonoluminescence, the cracking event is an extremely abrupt microscopic motion. The abrupt motion of the lattice nuclei can produce charged
Dendritic. Dendritic.
dendritic edges ideal for EV production. If EVs are produced in the cold fusion experiments, then they might not only be the source behind the transmutation of effects or events, but could also produce heat directly upon exploding. Thus, the source of the excess heat in the cold fusion experiments might be predominantly from the 0 point energy. Fractal emissions of the interior of a dielectric might offer means to trap and perhaps directly electrically couple to the EV. Messier notes that the dielectric breakdown is often a launcher of EVs. In T.T. Brown's electrogravitic experiments, where a charged capacitor exhibits an acceleration in the direction of the positive plate. The greatest thrusts were observed during dielectric breakdown. Lambertson's ceramic metallic uh, com- composite
Composite.
might likewise have a fractal emission phenomenon occurring within it to produce excess energy in its experiments. A possible hypothesis to explain the voltage overshoot and, and excess energy in Hyde's generator might involve fractal emissions within the dielectric spacers between the segmented stator elements. Also, Moray used exotic and radioactive materials with his cold cathodes to produce surface luminescent glow emissions. Could fractal emissions also be involved? The fractal emission plasma hypothesis has been proposed to explain the anomalous energy uh, from a specially designed block of barium ferrite, which is a magnet, in Sweet's vacuum triode amplifier, VTA, a well-witnessed, seemingly simple, self-running free energy device. The hypothesis has gained further support from new information on the process of conditioning the ferrite magnets and offers the opportunity for further replication.
Ferrite.
Yeah, barium ferrite magnet, and offers the opportunity for further replication by others. Sweet's conditioned barium ferrite, um, typically 6 by 4 by 1 inch ceramic blocks, exhibited the particular ability to shift its magnetic field in response to a very weak magnetic stimulation. This is unusual because the magnetic domains in barium ferrite do not readily move, especially after being conditioned like a permanent magnet. Another peculiarity was the tendency for the field motion to resonate at 60 hertz or any other intended frequency imprinted via the conditioning process. The conditioning steps involve first driving the barium ferrite at 60 hertz with 2 amps via a coil with 600 turns of number 28 wire surrounding its perimeter, and then abruptly pulsing the coil from a charged capacitor, 6,500 microfarads at 450 volts. The pulse is fired at the peak of the 60 hertz waveform. Also, the ceramic block was sometimes sandwiched between charged plates to impress a 20 kilovolt um, electrostatic potential across it during the conditioning process, which I think is really important. Um, no investigator can, no investigator claims success in replication until one tried a preliminary step. First, dip the barium ferrite ceramic block into liquid nitrogen. This is actually a key. Then the other conditioning steps could induce multiple cracks in the ceramic, loosening its grains. The easily moved magnetic fields would occur due to uh,
Pivoting.
pivoting grain motion, not magnetic domain motion, and such grain motion could be constantly created and stimulated and stimulating fractal emission plasmoids trapped within the cracks. The plasmoids would tend to persist because the barium ferrite has a low conductivity and acts like a dielectric. Sweet used pickup coils above the ceramic to receive the anomalous energy that would be produced when the ceramic block was driven by a weak 60 hertz magnetic field from the side. If the fractal emission hypothesis applied, Sweet may have discovered an elegant way to magnetically
Couple.
mag- couple to EV plasmoids trapped within a dielectric and excess energy from them. And I think Sweet's probably one of the coolest devices. Sparking devices, perhaps the most common way to extract energy associated with EVs is to absorb their pulses when they hit the anode. Shoulders has shown that the EVs tend to be the first portion of the plasma launched in discharge events. Correa has shown likewise the anomalous excess energy only occurs from the anomalous glow discharge, the precursor to the lossy vacuum arc discharge. Pappas has proposed that electric sparks produce excess energy, a hypothesis seemingly confirmed by Shoulders and Correa if the spark is of short duration. Dufour has also observed excess heat produced from sparks in his cold fusion experiments involving a pure hydrogen gas tube with stainless steel electrodes. Anomalous energy production seems to also have occurred in underwater carbon arc discharge experiments to produce the hydrocarbon fuel COH2. Newman's large discharge coil and Gray's motor both exhibit abrupt sparking phenomenon, and these inventors have claimed excess energy production. The Swiss ML converter is a famous self-running energy invention involving counter-rotating acrylic discs segmented like a Wimshur
Wim,
machine.
Wimshurst,
Wimshurst
Wimshurst,
machine that produces coronal a bright corona between the discs. Could the chronoplasma be comprised of EVs who yield their energy by discharging into the rectifier circuit? Question mark. Rectifying and efficiently absorbing the energy of large spikes like those produced by EV anode strikes is challenging engineering task. If solved, it could uh,
facilitate.
facilitate direct energy conversion in any device where abrupt energy discharges
Abrupt
and
electric,
EVs
abrupt electric discharges.
abrupt electric discharges and EV production are occurring. And in the thing here, it says counter rotating plasma vortex filaments. Pulsed A pulse current multiplier (PCM) circuit has been proposed as a means of converting low power but extremely high voltage spikes into lower voltage, high current, wider width pulses that could be rectified by standard circuits. The PCM is similar to a standard voltage divider circuit where a bank of capacitors are charged in series and discharged in parallel. Instead of switches, blocking inductors are used to guide the input voltage spikes down the low impedance series path. The PCM circuit allows the efficient conversion of weak electrostatic voltage spikes, which, if summed in sufficient quantities, could produce abundant energy as demonstrated by the invention of Hyde. If EV phenomena occur in all electrostatic discharges, then the PCM pulse code pulse current multiplier could provide an efficient method for converting the high voltage discharges and might provide the foundation for a practical device to tap the zero point energy. In summary, despite the beliefs of many of the scientific community, modern physics has accepted the empty space is filled with an energetic electromagnetic fluctuations called the zero point energy. The most powerful model has the zero point or ZPE source as a flux from hyperspace. All matter interacts with the ZPE and generally is in equilibrium with it. However, when abrupt matter motion occurs, especially with nuclei, some of the ZPE flux is twisted into our space and can manifest excessive energy. Sonoluminescence may be an example of trapping energy in a short-lived microscopic resonant structure. The energy may likewise be trapped in microscopic vortex ring plasmoids called EVs. The plasmoid vortex ring might be a natural resonate orthorotator of the ZPE flux, which would cause it to behave like a vacuum energy pump. Since EVs appear to be a precursor within any electric discharge, they may be the source behind the free energy machines involving electrical discharges. The excess energy would manifest as high voltage spikes, and an efficient way to convert the spikes to a more useful waveform is by use of a pulse current multiplier circuit. Thus, the uh, cohe-
Energy, 0 point
coherence,
energy
yeah, zero
coherence.
point energy coherence induced by the EV out could be output directed as electricity. Long-lived EV plasmoids could be produced during fractal emissions. They have been proposed to be the cause of excess heat as well as transmutation in the cold fusion experiments. EVs could carry and accelerate ions with sufficient kinetic energy to penetrate the Coulomb barrier of target nuclei and thus act as a microscopic particle accelerator, which is kind of interesting, to cause the transmutation of the lattice nuclei. Trapping EVs via fractal emissions within the interior of a dielectric might be the most efficient method for extracting their energy since they would tend to persist. Conditioning a barium ferrite ceramic block to maximize internal cracking to promote fractal emissions might be the key to replicating Sweet's self-running energy device. If other researchers could uh, become successful in reproducing the barium ferrite conditioning, it would set the stage for a widespread replication of perhaps the simplest free energy device ever invented. Whether EVs trigger pulses on nearby coils, strike anode plates, or get trapped within a dielectric, they appear to provide un,
A unifying
a
hypothesis.
unifying hypothesis to explain a wide range of energy devices whose source is apparently from the zero point energy. And then I think we had yeah, there. Okay, maybe you can read those ones because they're really small for me to
Okay,
see.
so these references here, reference 23, Pod D 1994, the Keeley motor, how it works. Um,
Yeah,
this one down here is observation of tiny bald lightning phenomena is underwater discharges for cold fusion experiments. Proposes the formation of hydrogen clusters to induce the fusion events. Hypothesis that hypothesis that a sonoluminescent bubble collapses into a toroidal vortex ring. Particles accelerated through the center of the vortex have sufficient kinetic energy to generate fusion.
wow.
These ones here. So um,
Yeah, maybe the one
electron
that. Yeah,
electron positron pairs under the appropriate conditions, the polarized state of the vacuum can be turned into a spin field. Torsion field technology might allow tapping of the vacuum energy, inertial propulsion, and superluminal communication.
that's
Maury King,
interesting.
1994, Vacuum Energy Vortices, International Symposium, I'm not sure what that is, on new energy.
Yep.
Hypothesis is proposed that the counter-rotating plasma vortices can induce macroscopic pair production of vacuum polarization displacement currents, and such activity yields a large zero-point energy coherence. An analysis of Sweet's V vacuum, what's that, VTA,
VTA vacuum triode amplifier.
vacuum triad amplifier device proposes a fractal emission inside the barium ferrite ceramic caused by the conditioning process, produces the plasma with grain pivoting, inducing the counter rotation. Closed current loops were photographed during the high voltage discharges. The loops enclose a magnetic field of very high energy density. They contrast and quickly become compact force-free loops that superficially resemble spheres. In these toroidal geometries, the trapped internal magnetic field balances external magnetic field to provide an almost force-free configuration. The bibliography cites numerous references on ball lightning. Okay, number 43, 1986, energy transfer problems of ball lightning. Central Research Institute of Physics, Budapest, Hungary. That's Egli C.
Yep.
Moray King, reference 44, 1989, tapping the 0 point energy. Okay, tapping the 0 point energy as an energy source and fundamentals of 0 point energy technology. Procedure of International Symposium on New Energy. I'm not sure if that's symposium, but
I think it
number
is. Yeah.
45, sorry?
I think it is. Yeah, you're right.
Shoulders, 1991, energy conversion using high charge density. Fundamental discovery on how to launch a micron-sized negatively charged plasmoid called electrum validium, EV. An EV yields excess energy over unity gain whenever it hits an anode or travels down the axis of a hollow coil. The excess energy comes from the 0 point energy.
Yep.
And here is Engineering Principles for Free Energy. Here is a must reading for the inventor. Electrical engineer Moray B. King expands with diagrams on how free energy and anti-gravity are possible. Theories of the 0 point energy maintain there are tremendous fluctuations of electrical field energy embedded within the fabric of space. There is limitless energy embedded in the fabric of space called 0 point energy. Inventors have made free energy machines only to be suppressed. Tapping the 0 point energy as an energy source, fundamentals of a 0 point energy technology. Are these books or are these just
These are the chapter. These are the chapters in the book.
vacuum energy vortices, the super tube, charge clusters, the basis of 0 point energy inventions,
That's the chapter we just read.
vortex filaments, torsion fields, and the 0 point energy,
We'll go
transforming
into
the
those.
planet with a 0 point energy experiment, dual vortex forms, the key to a large 0 point energy coherence, packed with diagrams, patterns, and photos with power shortages now a daily reality in many parts of the world. This book offers a fresh approach to very rarely ever mentioned in the mainstream media. By combining an analysis of promising energy inventions with the theories of 0 point energy, as published in physics journals, engineering principles are identified. The principles are published now in order to inspire scientists, inventors, and engineers to create fantastic new energy devices for the benefit of mankind. Join the quest for 0 point energy. Moray B. King is an internationally known lecturer and author. He speaks at energy conferences on the topic of 0 point energy and is well known in Tesla technology and frontier physics. He has been researching the field for over 25 years and has authored the book Tapping the 0 point energy.
Yeah, and then this one here is really cool. Something that I just kind of added in here because we were talking about coils in the last meeting, and this is the key to it all right here, actually.
On September the 10th, 1961, Walter and Lau Russell reported to their contacts at NORAD that the coils had worked and that the President of the United States could announce to the world that a greater, safer power than atomic energy could be provided for industry and transportation. The Russells were convinced that they had found and demonstrated a new source of energy and a conversion process that for what is now known as 0 point energy. It's a diagram.
Yeah, and you can see how the coils are tapered, and there's a compression and expansion sort of thing happening, and everything sort of there's a 0 point or a spot that everything is focused on, which is in the middle.
Mhm.
And if people really want to learn and understand how this stuff works, this is how you need to look at this.
The concept behind Russell's coils, the inner coils are wound from the ends toward the center in opposite directions. The outer coils are wound from the center toward ends in opposite directions.
Yeah, so they're tapered, which creates a gradient, right? Yeah. All right.
Everything you're talking about, so sonoluminescence. I was researching all that. I got tons of articles. I got same page open for my Walter Russell
Yeah.
in the lot wave lot. It's like you're reading my mind. This is amazing,
Yeah.
man. Absolutely amazing.
And
This is
in
such
in
good
next
work.
other Ken Shoulders ones, we'll dive more into this book. This book is excellent. Plus, he's got another book or a few other books as well too. But this is pretty amazing stuff, actually. So, does anyone have any other comments, or should we stop the recording? No? Okay, maybe you can shut the recording off. And thanks for showing up, everyone. And next time we'll have more Ken Shoulders and 0 point energy,
Okay,
which
thank
was
you, everyone.
coined by Ken Shoulders.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Have a
care, everybody.
wonderful rest of the day. Cheers,
Yeah,
and bye.
yeah, bye.